With patch 1.4, they added native HDR into the game, and what can I tell you? It is pretty awesome. The HDR black level floor, for an example, is pretty much perfect. The HDR specular highlights are really spectacular and looking amazing. The fact that we can adjust the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights as we like it makes this HDR implementation one of the best I have ever seen. Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Let's start as always with the basics first. No, before we start, please do me a big favor, please like, share and subscribe. But let's talk about HDR now. So we have literally just two settings in the game. When we go to graphics settings and when you scroll down, you have to enable HDR because in the factory mode it's actually disabled. So just enable it, and then the only setting what we have in the game is the user interface brightness setting, which is really just changing the user interface brightness unless you're in the menu or on the start screen, because here I found that the user interface brightness setting is also changing the entire screen. But again, this is just in the start screen. As soon you're in the game, the user interface brightness setting is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, just changing HUD symbols. And now, of course, the question is, how can we actually change the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights if we don't have any settings? And it is actually pretty simple, because on the PC, and I'm pretty sure the same counts for PlayStation 5 and Xbox, because I haven't tested those versions, just the PC version here, but Windows 11 supports or has this HDR calibration screen, and the game is actually relying or getting the info from this setting. So I made a video about this, so make sure that you actually set up your PC in combination with Windows 11, because Windows 10 does not support this setting as far as I know. But make sure you set this up in the correct way according to your screen to get the best experience in HDR. And when you have done this, when you have set up the HDR system level calibration on the console or PC, you can expect specular highlights like this here. And in my case, 1500 nits for the LG G4. And this looks just absolutely mind-blowing. And I have to say, you can't expect in a game like that an HDR implementation like Cyberpunk, okay? So there will be no neon lights or something like that. This is a very realistic game in regards to the color tones, in regards to the environment, okay? So this is the maximum what you get. But the fact that this looks so amazing in HDR is absolutely stunning. So far, one of the best HDR implementations what I have seen this year. And now let's get a little bit more technical. Let's talk about the HDR implementation in detail, and we're starting with the HDR black level floor, which is the most important factor in a good HDR implementation. And right now, what we can see here, it's not perfect because the game does not require a perfect HDR black level floor. The game right now actually looks slightly foggy, washed out, and that's okay, because that's what we like to see at the moment. It's a little bit foggy and it looks actually pretty good, but the game engine or the HDR implementation is more than capable of showing you 0 nits HDR perfect black, or OLED black as I like to call it, if the game requires it. And you can see this here in this example. It is actually pretty awesome, because that means the contrast in this game is just on a superb level. And here is another great example on how good the HDR black level floor is in this game. And I know I'm repeating myself, but this is really the most important factor. As soon you would have raised blacks, the whole game would look washed out. And there is no setting on your screen, TV or monitor where you can actually change this. The only way to mitigate it is actually using mods on a PC. But for a console player, that's not an option. And now let's talk about the HDR specular highlights. And here again, I told you this already, don't expect too much, because this is a game where you have a very realistic environment. So the most what you can expect are specular highlights like that, but those are looking pretty good. And when we're looking a little bit closer and when we're turning on the heat map, we can actually see how detailed those specular highlights are. So it's not just a very simple SDR HDR conversion, what I can tell so far at least. It does look pretty detailed, and this is what I like to see. I mean, I need to be honest here as well. Probably most of the time when you play the game, you don't have time to look at details like that. But the fact that those HDR specular highlights looking absolutely awesome, again, makes this one of the best HDR implementation what I've seen this year. And now let's talk about the HDR colors. And what I have found is that as soon you play this game in HDR, you get HDR color space. Not very much, but DCI-P3 is enough to actually make the color look more vibrant and more realistic. I mean, look at this comparison between HDR and SDR at the moment, and tell me in the comment section that you prefer SDR over HDR. And if you do so, please do me a favor, get a better TV monitor or screen, because there is no way that SDR in this game can look better than HDR. But it's not just about the HDR colors, it's also about dynamic range in specular highlights. I mean, look at those examples again. As soon we have HDR enabled, the dynamic range is so much better. The contrast is much better. I mean, try again and prove me wrong, or put in a comment section that SDR looks better, because it must be your monitor. There's no way that on a proper HDR screen, on a proper HDR monitor, the SDR implementation in this game would look better than HDR. There's not a single way that this is possible. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this video, and I hope I did not forget anything. We talked about the black level floor, we talked about specular highlights, we talked about HDR colors, we compared HDR with SDR, which is it's a big difference here in this game. I mean, it's in most games a big difference, depending on how good HDR is implemented or how good SDR is implemented, of course. But here, there's no way I would go back to SDR. I mean, not on an LG G4, okay? So again, if you have issues with the HDR display or HDR presentation on your monitor or screen, then it's most likely really your monitor or screen, because again, the technical data is here. There is no issue with the HDR black level floor. There are no issues with the specular highlights, and there is also no issue with the HDR colors. No, quite the opposite. We're getting actually just much more as soon we enable in HDR. So that means, again, if you have a bad HDR picture on your screen, monitor or TV, and SDR does look better, then check your settings, put your monitor type or whatever in the comment section, screen type, TV type, and we'll let you know if it's actually a proper HDR screen, because most of the time, even you have an HDR logo on your whatever monitor or whatsoever, it may be a very bad HDR screen. Okay, that's the truth, unfortunately. Okay, so unfortunately, you have to pay amount of money or some sort of money to get a proper HDR implementation or a proper HDR experience. Okay, in this case, the LG G4, which is not even the latest TV. And we have now TVs out there which can display HDR much, much better. But again, HDR in this game, absolute the winner. Let me know in the comment section what you think, and thank you very much for watching me. And yeah, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you.